Ryle flicks something off the knee of his jeans. It'll destroy him for life, that's what it'll do. I turn on my side to face him, lifting my head up onto my hand. Is it hard? Seeing things like that every day? He gives his head a slight shake. It should be a lot harder, but the more I'm around death, the more it just becomes a part of life. I'm not sure how I feel about that. He makes eye contact with me again. Give me another one, he says. I feel like mine was a little more twisted than yours. I disagree, but I tell him about the twisted thing I did a mere 12 hours ago. My mother asked me 2 days ago if I would deliver the eulogy at my father's funeral today. I told her I didn't feel comfortable, that I might be crying too hard to speak in front of a crowd, but that was a lie. I just didn't want to do it because I feel like eulogies should be delivered by those who respected the deceased. And I didn't much respect my father. Did you do it? I nod. Yeah. This morning. I sit up and pull my legs beneath me as I face him. You want to hear it? He smiles. Absolutely. I fold my hands in my lap and inhale a breath. I had no idea what to say. About an hour before the funeral, I told my mother I didn't want to do it. She said it was simple and that my father would have wanted me to do it. She said all I had to do was walk up to the podium and say 5 great things about my father. So, that's exactly what I did. Ryle lifts up onto his elbow, appearing even more interested. He can tell by the look on my face that it gets worse. Oh, no, Lily. What did you do? Here. Let me just reenact it for you. I stand up and walk around to the other side of my chair. I stand tall and act like I'm looking out over the same crowded room I was met with this morning. I clear my throat. Hello. My name is Lily Bloom, daughter of the late Andrew Bloom. Thank you all for joining us today as we mourn his loss. I wanted to take a moment to honor his life by sharing with you 5 great things about my father. The first thing. I look down at Ryle and shrug. That's it. He sits up. What do you mean? I take a seat on my lounge chair and lie back down. I stood up there for 2 solid minutes without saying another word. There wasn't one great thing I could say about that man, so I just stared silently at the crowd until my mother realized what I was doing and had my uncle remove me from the podium. Ryle tilts his head. Are you kidding me? You gave the anti-eulogy at your own father's funeral? I nod. I'm not proud of it. I don't think. I mean, if I had my way, he would have been a much better person and I would have stood up there and talked for an hour. Ryle lies back down. Wow, he says, shaking his head. You're kind of my hero. You just roasted a dead guy. That's tacky. Yeah, well. Naked truth hurts. I laugh. Your turn. I can't top that, he says. I'm sure you can come close. I'm not sure I can. I roll my eyes. Yes, you can. Don't make me feel like the worst person out of the 2 of us. Tell me the most recent thought you've had that most people wouldn't say out loud. He pulls his hands up behind his head and looks me straight in the eye. I want to fuck you. My mouth falls open. Then I clamp it shut again. I think I might be speechless. He shoots me a look of innocence. You asked for the most recent thought, so I gave it to you. You're beautiful. I'm a guy. If you were into one-night stands, I would take you downstairs to my bedroom and I would fuck you. I can't even look at him. His statement makes me feel a multitude of things all at once. Well, I'm not into one-night stands. I figured as much, he says. Your turn. He's so nonchalant, he acts as if he didn't just stun me into silence. I need a minute to regroup after that one, I say with a laugh. I try to think of something with a little shock value, but I can't get over the fact that he just said that. Out loud. Maybe because he's a neurosurgeon and I never pictured someone so educated throwing around the word fuck so casually. I gather myself somewhat and then say, okay. Since we're on the subject, the first guy I ever had sex with was homeless. He perks up and faces me. Oh, I'm gonna need more of this story. I stretch my arm out and rest my head on it. I grew up in Maine. We lived in a fairly decent neighborhood, but the street behind our house wasn't in the best condition. Our backyard butted up to a condemned house adjacent to 2 abandoned lots. I became friends with a guy named Atlas who stayed in the condemned house. No one knew he was living there other than me. I used to take him food and clothes and stuff. Until my father found out. What did he do? My jaw tightens. I don't know why I brought this up when I still force myself not to think about it on a daily basis. He beat him up. That's as naked as I want to get about that subject. Your turn. He regards me silently for a moment, as if he knows there's more to that story. But then he breaks eye contact. The thought of marriage repulses me, he says. I'm almost 30 years old and I have no desire for a wife. I especially don't want children. The only thing I want out of life is success. Lots of it. But if I admit that out loud to anyone, it makes me sound arrogant. Professional success? Or social status? He says, both. Anyone can have children. Anyone can get married. But not everyone can be a neurosurgeon. I get a lot of pride out of that. And I don't just want to be a great neurosurgeon. I want to be the best in my field. You're right. It does make you sound arrogant. He smiles. My mother fears I'm wasting my life away because all I do is work. You're a neurosurgeon and your mother is disappointed in you? I laugh. Good Lord, that's insane. Are parents ever really happy with their children? Will they ever be good enough? He shakes his head. My children wouldn't be. Not many people have the drive I do, so I'd only be setting them up for failure. That's why I'll never have any. I actually think that's respectable, Ryle. A lot of people refuse to admit they might be too selfish to have children. He shakes his head. Oh, I'm way too selfish to have children. And I'm definitely way too selfish to be in a relationship. So how do you avoid it? You just don't date? He cuts his eyes to me, and there's a slight grin affixed to his face. When I have time, there are girls who satisfy those needs. I don't lack for anything in that department, if that's what you're asking. But love has never appealed to me. It's always been more of a burden than anything. I wish I looked at love like that. It would make my life a hell of a lot easier. I envy you. I have this idea that there's a perfect man out there for me. I tend to become jaded easily because no one ever meets my standards. I feel like I'm on an infinite search for the Holy Grail. You should try my method, he says. Which is? One night stands. He raises an eyebrow, like it's an invitation. I'm glad it's dark, because my face is on fire. I could never sleep with someone if I didn't see it going anywhere. I say this out loud, but my words lack conviction when I say it to him. He drags in a long, slow breath, and then rolls onto his back. Not that kind of girl, huh? He says this with a trace of disappointment in his voice. I match his disappointment. I'm not sure I'd even want to turn him down if he made a move, but I might have just thwarted that possibility. If you wouldn't sleep with someone you just met, his eyes meet mine again. Exactly how far would you go? I don't have an answer for that. I roll onto my back because the way he's looking at me makes me want to rethink one-night stands. I'm not necessarily against them, I suppose. I've just never been propositioned for one by someone I would consider it with. Until now. I think. Is he even propositioning me? I've always been terrible at flirting. He reaches out and grabs the edge of my lounge chair. In one swift movement and with very minimal effort, he drags my chair closer to him until it bumps his. My whole body stiffens. He's so close now, I can feel the warmth of his breath cutting through the cold air. If I were to look at him, his face would be mere inches from mine. I refuse to look at him, because he'd probably kiss me, and I know absolutely nothing about this guy, other than a couple of naked truths. But that doesn't weigh on my conscience at all when he rests a heavy hand on my stomach. How far would you go, Lily? His voice is decadent. Smooth. It travels straight to my toes. I don't know, I whisper. His fingers begin to crawl toward the hem of my shirt. He begins to slowly inch it upward until a slither of my stomach is showing. Oh, Jesus, I whisper, feeling the warmth from his hand as he slides it up my stomach. Against my better judgment, I face him again, and the look in his eyes completely captivates me. He looks hopeful and hungry and completely confident. He sinks his teeth into his bottom lip as his hand begins to tease its way up my shirt. I know he can feel my heart thrashing around in my chest. Hell, he can probably hear it. Is this too far? He asks. I don't know where this side of me is coming from, but I shake my head and say, not even close. With a grin, his fingers brush the underneath of my bra, lightly trickling over my skin that is now covered in chills. As soon as my eyelids fall shut, the piercing of a ring rips through the air. His hand stiffens when we both realize it's a phone. His phone. He drops his forehead to my shoulder. Damn it. I frown when his hand slips out from beneath my shirt. He fumbles in his pocket for his phone, standing up and walking several feet away from me to take the call. Dr. Kincaid, he says. He listens intently, his hand gripping the back of his neck. What about Roberts? I'm not even supposed to be on call right now. More silence is followed with, yeah, give me 10 minutes. On my way. He ends the call and slides his phone back in his pocket. When he turns to face me, he looks a little disappointed. He points to the door that leads to the stairwell. I have to. I nod. It's fine. He considers me for a moment, and then holds up a finger. Don't move, he says, reaching for his phone again. He walks closer and holds it up as if he's about to snap a picture of me. I almost object, but I don't even know why. I'm fully clothed. It just doesn't feel that way for some reason. He snaps a picture of me lying in the lounge chair, my arms relaxed above my head. I have no idea what he plans to do with that picture, but I like that he took it. I like that he had the urge to remember what I look like, even though he knows he'll never see me again. He stares at the photo on his screen for a few seconds and smiles. I'm half tempted to take a picture of him in return, but I'm not sure I want a reminder of someone I'll never see again. The thought of that is a little depressing. It was nice meeting you, Lily Bloom. I hope you defy the odds of most dreams and actually accomplish yours. I smile, equally saddened and confused by this guy. I'm not sure that I've ever spent time with someone like him before, someone of a completely different lifestyle and tax bracket. I probably never will again. But I'm pleasantly surprised to see that we aren't all that different. Misconception confirmed. He looks down at his feet for a moment as he stands in somewhat of an unsure pose. It's as if he's suspended between the desire to say something else to me and the need to leave. He glances at me one last time, this time without so much of a poker face. I can see the disappointment in the set of his mouth before he turns and walks in the other direction. He opens the door and I can hear his footsteps fade as he rushes down the stairwell. I'm alone on the rooftop once again, but to my surprise, I'm a little saddened by that now. Chapter 2. Lucy, the roommate who loves to hear herself sing, is rushing around the living room, gathering keys, shoes, a pair of sunglasses. I'm seated on the couch, opening up shoeboxes stuffed with some of my old things from when I lived at home. I grabbed them when I was home for my father's funeral this week. You work today? Lucy asks. Nope. I have bereavement leave until Monday. She stops in her tracks a Monday? She scoffs. Lucky bitch. Yes, Lucy. I'm so lucky my father died. I say it sarcastically, of course, but I cringe when I realize it's not actually very sarcastic. You know what I mean, she mutters. She grabs her purse as she balances on one foot while sliding her shoe onto the other. I'm not coming home tonight. Staying over at Alex's house. The door slams behind her. We have a lot in common on the surface, but beyond wearing the same size clothes, being the same age, and both having four-letter names that start with an L and end with a Y, there's not much else there that makes us more than just roommates. I'm okay with that, though. Other than the incessant singing, she's pretty tolerable. She's clean and she's gone a lot. Two of the most important qualities in a roommate. I'm pulling the lid off the top of one of the shoeboxes when my cell phone rings. I reach across the couch and grab it. When I see that it's my mother, I press my face into the couch and fake cry into a throw pillow. I bring the phone to my ear. Hello? There's 3 seconds of silence, and then, hello, Lily. I sigh and sit back up on the couch. Hey, Mom. I'm really surprised she's speaking to me. It's only been 1 day since the funeral. That's 364 days sooner than I expected to hear from her. How are you? I ask. She sighs dramatically. Fine, she says. Your aunt and uncle went back to Nebraska this morning. It'll be my first night alone since. You'll be fine, Mom, I say, trying to sound confident. She's quiet for too long, and then she says, Lily. I just want you to know that you shouldn't be embarrassed about what happened yesterday. I pause. I wasn't. Not even the slightest bit. Everyone freezes up once in a while. I shouldn't have put that kind of pressure on you, knowing how hard the day was on you already. I should have just had your uncle do it. I close my eyes. Here she goes again. Covering up what she doesn't want to see. Taking blame that isn't even hers to take. Of course she convinced herself that I froze up yesterday, and that's why I refused to speak. Of course she did. I have half a mind to tell her it wasn't a mistake. I didn't freeze up. I just had nothing great to say about the unremarkable man she chose to be my father. But part of me does feel guilty for what I did, specifically because it's not something I should have done in the presence of my mother, so I just accept what she's doing and go along with it. Thanks, Mom. Sorry I choked. It's fine, Lily. I need to go, I have to run to the insurance office. We have a meeting about your father's policies. Call me tomorrow, okay? I will, I tell her. Love you, Mom. I end the call and toss the phone across the couch. I open the shoebox on my lap and pull out the contents. On the very top is a small wooden, hollow heart. I run my fingers over it and remember the night I was given this heart. As soon as the memory begins to sink in, I set it aside. Nostalgia is a funny thing. I move a few old letters and newspaper clippings aside. Beneath all of it, I find what I was hoping was inside these boxes. And also sort of hoping wasn't. My Ellen diaries. I run my hands over them. There are 3 of them in this box, but I'd say there are probably 8 or 9 total. I haven't read any of these since the last time I wrote in them. I refuse to admit that I kept a diary when I was younger because that was so cliché. Instead, I convinced myself that what I was doing was cool, because it wasn't technically a diary. I addressed each of my entries to Ellen DeGeneres, because I began watching her show the first day it aired in 2003 when I was just a little girl. I watched it every day after school and was convinced Ellen would love me if she got to know me. I wrote letters to her regularly until I turned 16, but I wrote them like one would write entries in a diary. Of course I knew the last thing Ellen DeGeneres probably wanted was a random girl's journal entries. Luckily, I never actually sent any in. But I still liked addressing all the entries to her, so I continued to do that until I stopped writing in them altogether. I open another shoebox and find more of them. I sort through them until I grab the one from when I was 15 years old. I flip it open, searching for the day I met Atlas. There wasn't much that happened in my life worth writing about before he entered it, but somehow I filled 6 journals full before he ever came into the picture. I swore I'd never read these again, but with the passing of my father, I've been thinking about my childhood a lot. Maybe if I read through these journals I'll somehow find a little strength for forgiveness. Although I fear I'm running the risk of building up even more resentment. I lie back on the couch and I begin reading. Dear Ellen. Before I tell you what happened today, I have a really good idea for a new segment on your show. It's called Ellen at Home. I think lots of people would like to see you outside of work. I always wonder what you're like at your home when it's just you and Portia and the cameras aren't around. Maybe the producers can give her a camera and sometimes she can just sneak up on you and film you doing normal things, like watching TV or cooking or gardening. She could film you for a few seconds without you knowing and then she could scream Ellen at home and scare you. It's only fair, since you love pranks. Okay, now that I told you that, I keep meaning to and have been forgetting, I'll tell you about my day yesterday. It was interesting. Probably my most interesting day to write about yet, if you don't count the day Abigail Ivory slapped Mr. Carson for looking at her cleavage. You remember a while back when I told you about Mrs. Burleson who lived behind us? She died the night of that big snowstorm? My dad said she owed so much in taxes that her daughter wasn't able to take ownership of the house. Which is fine by her, I'm sure, because the house was starting to fall apart anyway. It probably would have been more of a burden than anything. The house has been empty since Mrs. Burleson died, which has been about 2 years. I know it's been empty because my bedroom window looks out over the backyard, and there hasn't been a single soul that goes in or out of that house since I can remember. Until last night. I was in bed shuffling cards. I know that sounds weird, but it's just something I do. I don't even know how to play cards. But when my parents get into fights, shuffling cards just calms me down sometimes and gives me something to focus on. Anyway, it was dark outside, so I noticed the light right away. It wasn't bright, but it was coming from that old house. It looked more like candlelight than anything, so I went to the back porch and found Dad's binoculars. I tried to see what was going on over there, but I couldn't see anything. It was way too dark. Then after a little while, the light went out. This morning, when I was getting ready for school, I saw something moving behind that house. I crouched down at my bedroom window and saw someone sneaking out the back door. It was a guy and he had a backpack. He looked around like he was making sure no one saw him, and then he walked between our house and the neighbor's house and went and stood at the bus stop. I'd never seen him before. It was the first time he rode my bus. He sat in the back and I sat in the middle, so I didn't talk to him. But when he got off the bus at school, I saw him walk into the school, so he must go there. I have no idea why he was sleeping in that house. There's probably no electricity or running water. I thought maybe he did it as a dare, but today he got off the bus at the same stop as me. He walked down the street like he was going somewhere else, but I ran straight to my room and watched out the window. Sure enough, a few minutes later, I saw him sneaking back inside that empty house. I don't know if I should say something to my mother. I hate to be nosy, because it's none of my business. But if that guy doesn't have anywhere to go, I feel like my mother would know how to help him since she works at a school. I don't know. I might wait a couple days before I say something and see if he goes back home. He might just need a break from his parents. Same as I wish I could have sometimes. That's all. I'll let you know what happens tomorrow. Lily. Dear Ellen. I fast forward through all your dancing when I watch your show. I used to watch the beginning when you danced through the audience, but I get a little bored with it now and would rather just hear you talk. I hope that doesn't make you mad. Okay, so I found out who the guy is, and yes, he's still going over there. It's been 2 days now and I still haven't told anyone. His name is Atlas Corrigan and he's a senior, but that's all I know. I asked Katie who he was when she sat next to me on the bus. She rolled her eyes and told me his name. But then she said, I don't know anything else about him, but he smells. She scrunched up her nose like it grossed her out. I wanted to yell at her and tell her he can't help it, that he doesn't have any running water. But instead, I just looked back at him. I might have stared a little too much, because he caught me looking at him. When I got home I went to the backyard to do some gardening. My radishes were ready to be pulled, so I was out there pulling them. The radishes are the only thing left in my garden. It's starting to get cold so there's not much else I can plant right now. I probably could have waited a few more days to pull them, but I was also outside because I was being nosy. I noticed as I was pulling them that some were missing. It looked like they had just been dug up. I know I didn't pull them and my parents never mess with my garden. That's when I thought about Atlas, and how it was more than likely him. I hadn't thought about how, if he doesn't have access to a shower, he probably doesn't have food either. I went inside my house and made a couple of sandwiches. I grabbed 2 sodas out of the fridge and a bag of chips. I put them in a lunch bag and I ran it over to the abandoned house and set it on the back porch by the door. I wasn't sure if he saw me, so I knocked real hard and then ran back to my house and went straight to my room. By the time I got to the window to see if he was going to come outside, the bag was already gone. That's when I knew he'd been watching me. I'm kind of nervous now that he knows I know he's staying there. I don't know what I'll say to him if he tries to talk to me tomorrow. Lily. Dear Ellen. I saw your interview with the presidential candidate Barack Obama today. Does that make you nervous? Interviewing people who could potentially run the country? I don't know a lot about politics, but I don't think I could be funny under that kind of pressure. Man. So much has happened to both of us. You just interviewed someone who might be our next president and I'm feeding a homeless boy. This morning when I got to the bus stop, Atlas was already there. It was just the 2 of us at first, and I'm not gonna lie, it was awkward. I could see the bus coming around the corner and I was wishing it would drive a little faster. Right when it pulled up, he took a step closer to me and, without looking up, he said, "Thank you." The doors opened on the bus and he let me walk on first. I didn't say you're welcome because I was kind of shocked by my reaction. His voice gave me chills. Ellen. Has a boy's voice ever done that to you? Oh, wait. Sorry. Has a girl's voice ever done that to you? He didn't sit by me or anything on the way there, but on the way back from school, he was the last one getting on. There weren't any empty seats, but I could tell by the way he scanned all the people on the bus that he wasn't looking for an empty seat. He was looking for me. When his eyes met mine, I looked down at my lap real quick. I hate that I'm not very confident around guys. Maybe that's something I'll grow into when I finally turn 16. He sat down next to me and dropped his backpack between his legs. That's when I noticed what Katie was talking about. He did kind of smell, but I didn't judge him for that. He didn't say anything at first, but he was fidgeting with a hole in his jeans. It wasn't the kind of hole that was there to make jeans look stylish. I could tell it was there because it was a genuine hole, due to his pants being old. They actually looked a little too small for him, because his ankles were showing. But he was skinny enough that they fit him just fine everywhere else. Did you tell anyone? He asked me. I looked at him when he spoke, and he was looking right back at me like he was worried. It was the first time I had actually gotten a good look at him. His hair was dark brown, but I thought maybe if he washed it, it wouldn't be as dark as it looked right then. His eyes were bright, unlike the rest of him. Real blue eyes, like the kind you see on a Siberian husky. I shouldn't compare his eyes to a dog, but that's the first thing I thought when I saw them. I shook my head and looked back out the window. I thought he might get up and find another seat at that point, since I said I didn't tell anyone, but he didn't. The bus made a few stops, and the fact that he was still sitting by me gave me a little courage, so I made my voice a whisper. "Why don't you live at home with your parents?" He stared at me for a few seconds, like he was trying to decide if he wanted to trust me or not. Then he said, "Because they don't want me to." That's when he got up. I thought I'd made him mad, but then I realized he got up because we were at our stop. I grabbed my stuff and followed him off the bus. He didn't try to hide where he was heading today like he usually does. Normally, he walks down the street and goes around the block so I don't see him cut through my backyard. But today he started to walk toward my yard with me. When we got to where I would normally turn to go inside and he would keep walking, we both stopped. He kicked at the dirt with his foot and looked behind me at my house. "What time do your parents get home?" "Around 5, I said. It was 3:45. He nodded and looked like he was about to say something else, but he didn't. He just nodded again and started walking toward that house with no food or electricity or water. "Now, Ellen, I know what I did next was stupid, so you don't have to tell me." I called out his name, and when he stopped and turned around I said, "If you hurry, you can take a shower before they get home." My heart was beating so fast, because I knew how much trouble I could get into if my parents came home and found a homeless guy in our shower. I'd probably very well die. But I just couldn't watch him walk back to his house without offering him something. He looked down at the ground again, and I felt his embarrassment in my own stomach. He didn't even nod. He just followed me inside my house and never said a word. The whole time he was in the shower, I was panicking. I kept looking out the window and checking for either of my parents' cars, even though I knew it would be a good hour before they got home. I was nervous one of the neighbors might have seen him come inside, but they didn't really know me